We had this wild hair of getting out of the studio and going somewhere else. And so we are in a open space and it's echoey. So we'll try to edit some of that out. Anyway, how are you?
I'm good. I just had a workout this morning and sweat, and it felt good to detox in that way.
I haven't sweat in 14 years. And you can probably tell by this physique.
Yeah, how are you doing this morning?
You and I have both, well, not just you and I. Yeah, you and I. I'm thinking of grammar here. You and I have been going
I appreciate that.
yeah.
I like people who appreciate grammar.
Let's go ran to the store. What? Oh, you mean run to the store? Yeah. Anyway, are we ever going to have a conversation?
We are right now. We are having it.
I think a lot of people I know are going through this angsty thing, and it's not bad, but it's uncomfortable. And I think I've spent a lot of my life trying to be comfortable. And in my relationship with God and with my friends, as we get honest with ourselves and with each other, it can be a little bit angst producing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fear of the unknown, the kind of the what's next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter if you're 18 or 68 like me, many people are in that place.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling that. I think, I have all these different projects evolving and growing and taking shape. This podcast is becoming a life of its own. It's its own thing, and I'm in this place of, I mean, Rachel said it earlier, like recalibration.
Who's Rachel?
Rachel is one of my awesome friends slash pastor slash sister. She's awesome. And yeah, we've had some really good conversations around this of this being in suspense. Like it's like you're suspended in the air and you don't know which direction is up or down, left or right. And how do you? It seems like a paradox. Well, it is a paradox. How do you get comfortable in that space of hanging in suspension and really unsure of where to go and how to move? And so for me, that's like with this podcast, like I think us doing this check-in and just seeing where we're at with that and what's really going on behind the scene and off camera. I think it's important for us to have these check-ins and to be real with just where we are.
Yeah.
It's been hard. Like you said, this whole year for me has been a recalibration, but specifically in the last couple months of winter, being in dormancy and being in rest and being in darkness. And now we're transitioning into spring. Like, I think that's ruffling up a lot of things for a lot of people.
Yeah.
With my creativity, I've struggled to get into a rhythm and a flow of being in that creative space of it's just like I'm just wood burning and everything's flowing and I'm good. It's like I keep getting met with like these blocks or like, these quote unquote setbacks, and learning how to just sit in that and trust God in the process is like really challenging.
Well, yeah, I call that noise. When you were talking about just the angst or that suspension, there's that spoken word or that written word thing by Pierre de Chardin about the slow work of God and being in suspension and getting okay with the anxiety that happens there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily fear, although it can be.
Mm-hmm.
It's learning how to get comfortable there. And I admit I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
This podcast has really been a growing opportunity for me. And I didn't think it would be the podcast, but Darby, one of your close friends and one of my friends, said, "Hey, you guys are doing this podcast, but you're losing your spirit in it."
Mm-hmm.
And I went, just what I didn't want to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it stung, and Darby loves us. So again, it's all good, but it's like, you have to take a hard look at yourself.
Mhm.
It's easy to want to deflect and blame and make excuses, but at the end of the day, you have to look at what you're doing and I guess why you're doing it.
Well, what you said that it's a growth opportunity for you. So what specifically, what areas do you feel like you're growing and what's the challenge for you? Like where are you feeling the resistance to grow or to be okay in that space?
Just call it what it is. I don't like being out of control. And when you start, this is for me in the journey I'm on, is when you start trusting God and start going, I'm going to trust God in this situation. That's easy to say, especially in the South where we are, where everybody is, quote, a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm not even sure I would call myself that anymore. I would say I'm a follower of Jesus and his teachings. Big difference. It's learning how to let go of that. And so ask me the question again, because I got way off in
Well,
pontificating.
it's okay. I mean, so where are the growth opportunities? Specifically with this podcast, what is it shedding light on for you?
That I care way too much what people think of me. I
Mhm.
want everybody to love me. I want to be whatever, known for being wise, for being an encouragement, blah, 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 all the stuff. And it's not about that. Our goal is to have real conversations. And really, it's about having conversations,
Mhm.
not the content always. And
Mhm.
that's some of the feedback we've been getting. You guys sound scripted. True. We give us some ideas and we throw it into AI and we come up with an idea and then we go try to script that out. And my friend Jerry Riddick said, you guys, it's not about the content, it's about the conversation.
Mhm.
Um,
You and I have always had this ability to go deep and talk, even when it was uncomfortable, and even to the point where everyone's left the room and it's just you and I, and it's
right.
past midnight, and we're still pressing into something, and that to me is um, something to like.
Love you, darling.
Love you too. That's something that is I'm grateful for, and it's a rarity in the sense of, I have that with a few close friends, but to have that with my own dad, you and your dad didn't get to this level. I mean, y'all healed and y'all got close and y'all, moved past a lot of things, but
Yeah.
like it wasn't this deep. And so and it's not like we have to do anything with it. I don't even think it's about doing anything with it. It's like, for me, it's like wanting to honor it and just be in
Yeah.
it, be in your presence,
It got deep at the end because I started doing what we're doing with my father.
right.
So we did it. We had these interviews for about 5 years before he died.
Yeah.
And as I asked really probing, deep questions, things like, talk to me about the family you grew up in, the prejudice and bias that was there.
Mhm.
Talk about, your marriage, did you love my mother? Things like that. I mean, it got
Yeah.
deep. And what was strange to me, my father, who I thought I didn't know how to connect, would go deep with that. It
Yeah.
was almost like he welcomed it.
Mhm.
And so I've got many hours of him and me talking about similar things. And he was a World War II veteran. When the war started, he was 18.
Mhm.
And so,
Well, and I never saw him as like a grandfather. I don't think I ever saw him as this tough, like rigid person. Like he had this softness about him and this welcoming presence about him. I remember when
yeah,
he he got his war relics and his little treasure box out, and he shared. Do you
yeah,
remember that? It was like a show and tell, and he got that all of us kids out,
yeah.
and told us these stories, and I wish we had.
What's that? What's that called when a time capsule?
Yeah, it is a time capsule.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have it still.
Yeah. But and I think I was maybe in high school when that happened, and I don't think truly appreciated it in that moment. I think actually he gave us a couple like medals, and maybe like I or one of the other kids misplaced it, and you got angry. Do you remember that?
No.
And
Oh,
you
yeah, yeah.
do you remember
It
that?
was some sort of emblem that he got when he
And he
was
was like,
in
"Y'all,"
Japan.
and you were just like, you were like angry in the sense of like, y'all don't even understand what this even means. And we didn't. We didn't
Right.
have the wherewithal to put it together that like this is a snapshot in time because we didn't have a lot of time with Grandpa.
Well, it has his DNA all over it.
Yeah.
You know, and it was, I mean, he was a scared kid. I mean, he's younger than my grandson is now when he was in war. You know,
Well, we didn't live near them, so we saw them once, twice a year, and so I didn't get that. I wish now looking back, it's like I wish I could have gotten more of that time to know my grandfather as a man,
right.
as a human being, beyond
Yeah.
even just, you know, his lived experience, but just who he was and the essence of who he was. And so I feel like that's the same for you of like these podcasts, I think if we're just recalibrating here and getting back to like the why behind the what.
Good word, recalibrate.
Mhm. But that's for yeah, the why for me is like I want to capture like I want to be able to show my kids these videos and show how real and raw it is. Like
Yeah.
some of the feedback too is like don't just talk about the stuff like actually like in a third party sense or in this like kind of intangible way, but like the stuff that you and I have had to work through and sort through as the dynamic of father daughter, but
Yeah.
also just as human to human.
I can do that with your siblings, and we have some deep talks. It's just a different dynamic with each one of you.
Hmm.
You take the time to sit down and have the conversations. You know, yesterday both of us were kind of triggered by some stuff that we know in our own relational circles about some behavior that was unbecoming that really made you angry. At least that was my perception. Is
Yeah.
that true?
Yeah, and I think that's where when I popped off, which I go on these rants, like I think that's in those moments. Like sometimes I just need you to listen to me. I think you always have you have an
Well, I
answer.
want to fix it.
Yeah, and you have an answer for everything. And
It's like Uncle Buck.
would you could you? Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and that's then that like perpetuates my rage because I'm like I don't. That's not
You're
what
not
I'm.
listening, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't need you to comment on everything that I'm saying or have an answer for everything. I don't even need an answer. I just need to like pop off and and that's also like it is, I know and I'm aware that I have a lot of energy and that can be really intense.
Well,
It can be really intense for people.
and me realizing in that whole thing of you needing to speak is me needing to listen. I read this book by Paul Zoll about peace in the third phase of life. Good book for people my age. Basically says find somebody that will listen to you and then find someone that you can listen to.
Hmm.
So that's good to know about you because sometimes I feel like I do need to fix things and I really don't.
Well, is that your personality or do you feel like that's a dad thing?
I don't know. I know. I think, yeah. Well, I do know. I think it's an and. It is a dad thing because you want to protect your children no matter how old they are. But it's also a personality thing,
Hmm.
and it's also an insecurity in my life of not feeling like I matter. And again, my thing, right? I think I try to fix things because I want to matter. That's not really legal in relationships.
Well, where do you think that stems from? Like, is that like mommy daddy issues for you?
I resent that. Yeah.
I mean, I
Um,
think, I mean, that's
Probably. I
in my
mean,
experience with therapy, because I have gone to therapy.
yeah.
I'm not seeing a therapist now. I'm seeing a spiritual
Counselor,
director
yeah.
and a coach. But that often would come up in therapy is like, we can probably, if we trace this particular thing back, it could be a mommy issue or a daddy issue or both. And I feel like that's,
Well, for me, it's a daddy issue in the cosmic sense.
mm,
I I grew up in the church. Everybody might as well know it. My dad was a pastor for 60 years, and I spent a lot of years unlearning things that the church said, not what God said.
mhm,
Because a lot of times what the church says, especially in our culture, and what God said and what Jesus said are 180 from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was God was this great big old man that was a father. Jesus loved me, but God kind of tolerated me.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I've talked about it a lot of times. And my image of God was the Lincoln Memorial.
Right.
He was big and he was cold, and you could sit in his lap and as a child and all that if you wanted to, but he basically tolerated your existence. Don't know where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
But unlearning that for the past 40 years is me walking in this new grace of I'm for you. I see you. You matter. You matter to me.
Even if you're not fixing something, or even if you're
Right.
not doing anything, just your very being.
In fact,
matters.
that's the thing.
Yeah.
I want you to be, not do. And that's some of the things I'm learning this week is when you got triggered and were angry. Did I try to fix it yesterday? Probably.
I think you just had a comment. It's funny because, like, mom, you have a comment for everything. Mom doesn't say anything. She really does. I think is just listening and processing to the point where I'm like, Mom, anything, like, like crickets.
But
So it's so funny because y'all are on both extremes, and I'm screaming and cussing out the ethers, and y'all are so polar
well,
opposite.
she's a middle child, so she kind of goes into silent mode. But then we'll be sitting, peeling potatoes, and she'll blurt out something about the world or you or your siblings or whatever, me.
Well, okay, so what else though? Let's get back to this for you. Like, what is the podcast for you? Like, why are you doing this with
One
me?
is because you wanted to do it. Two, I really think that the dynamic that we have lands with people.
Well, how does it land with you? How does it affect your life? Like our relation, specifically our relationship, especially the stuff that we've had to wrestle through and get through. Like,
By the way, I use humor as a deflection.
yeah, I know. Our whole
It's great. No,
Powers family.
we are laugh at funerals.
Wasn't that another feedback of we got of you made some joke. I said something pretty serious and you deflected with
Sarcasm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know the why yet. I thought I did when we started because, why are you doing this?
Hmm.
I think I don't want to be a hypocrite in the biggest sense of that word. I'm not just talking about religion and stuff like that, but, I was part of this company called Giant for a while. And one of the things they say is you can't give away what you don't have.
Right.
So, it's modeling this. How do we model relationships?
Yeah.
I'm very critical that we are intimate on some weird technological level, but we can't sit down and have a face-to-face conversation with each other because we'll have an anxiety attack, or it'll trigger me
Oh, you mean like just in the social media
just in general. And so I'm
context
going,
of
so yeah. So for me, the why is how do we my why is I'm doing this to break down barriers. And I'm doing it because you and I know how to do it pretty well, not perfect by any means. And we can show what it's like to have what?
I just don't know if this was the keep going. I don't know.
What?
I don't know if this is the question that I asked.
Oh, what was it? Come on, man.
I asked well, I want to know the why.
Not really, because you just cut me off.
Well, finish that and then I'll ask
No,
the
go
actual
ahead.
question.
What's the
I
question?
think the question I asked was we have to rewatch the tape, but even though it's not a tape anymore.
Hasn't been for quite some time.
But how does our specific relationship land with you?
I treasure it. I love that we have the conversations. I love that we have done the work. People are seeing this in
Doing the
2000. Huh?
Doing the work.
What did I say?
Done the work. Like we have done the work.
We have done it and we're doing it, but the work that we've done that led us to this has been in the making since you were a child.
How, like, I'm curious how the relationship with you, with not even just me, your kids, how that impacts you and your world and with your peers. Like, how does that affect you day to day?
Well, this is something that freaks people, surprise people maybe, is I'm learning from you guys.
Yeah.
I watch you and I learn. That takes active humility, which I'm not good at. That's the part that scares you, you know. If I let them be in the front and I be in the back, they're going to notice them before they notice me. It's very ego-centered. But with you and me, it's I don't have these kind of conversations really with anybody else except maybe your mother.
Mm-hmm.
We have this. I don't even know how to describe it. It's a special. It's just special.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of anybody else in the world that I have that kind of a relationship with, where we can just riff and go deep and talk about things that daughters and fathers don't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you tell it from your side.
Yeah, well, I think there was a point we always were close, and I think I've always was like a daddy's girl and wanted your, sought your approval and all that stuff. But I think the big shift happened when I was in college, right before I wrote y'all my little coming out letter,
Declaration.
which is like the most embarrassing. You'd have to pay me a lot of money to read that on
I
camera.
will. I'll pay
It's
you.
so embarrassing.
We'll do that
It's a
next.
out letter where I don't even come out in the letter. It's so bad. And I use and even back then I said, what is it? Like the saying of like, there's a big elephant in the room.
Yeah.
What is it?
Uh,
And
what's the
I said, there's a big black elephant in the room. And it's like not even, yeah, anyways. Um, I think that in that moment, I didn't even know if I was consciously aware of it. It was more of an intuitive thing of I felt myself drifting from y'all and not showing you the real me. Because for so many years I didn't. Like I didn't show y'all. There was such an interior landscape about me that no one knew about. Like everything on the outside, if you look.
Was that always true, or did that start
Well,
later, like in
I think it's
junior
always
high?
been true because I think I was really deep. I remember I remember my thoughts as like a 9-year-old or like the actual thoughts.
Me
Like,
too.
yeah. I mean, when I think of these memories I had or thoughts that I had, and when it
When
was,
you were 9.
well, even before that, because when I lived here, like that's for me, it's always helpful in my brain. The places we lived
Yeah.
gives me the timeline of like,
Yeah,
oh,
that's true about every 5 years.
yeah, like I was younger than 5 and a half in Mississippi, and I had this very thought. Like and then I started building walls up because you have these thoughts, and maybe as a kid you start saying them out loud
Or
because
thinking them out loud.
yeah, and someone responds to it, and they respond typically either positively or negatively, and then you base that gauge on then, oh, maybe I shouldn't share that. Oh, maybe that's just for me. That's a me thought.
It's
That's
all the
so as young. I mean, I remember a lot of thoughts in Pittsburgh too of like when I would meet adults and I remember the adults who would look me in the eye and ask me, and you were like that. Like one of Haley's friends, Lindsay Terpovich, she was like that. Like she looked into my soul and didn't just say, oh, like she's just a kid, I'm going to write her off. Or, there was just this air sometimes about adults where I remember the adults, the teachers who were real with me.
good teachers and not so good ones.
Yeah. And so that I started though, especially when I was questioning and curious about my sexuality, like that's a whole thing. That's stuff that I'm, even on that journey now, but that was all just my own. I was like, okay, that's for nobody. I'm not going to say anything until I had it was like almost like that needed to come out with y'all because it was such a big part of me that I was not sharing. I felt us the I was sensing the drift, and so when I said that, when I came out to y'all and we started talking about that is what opened the door of having more of these real honest conversations. And I started seeing you as not just my dad, but you as a person, another person, as a man moving through this world. And you had these opinions and these ideas that I didn't like that were like really hard to hear and really not, I was like, man, do I even like my dad? Like as a person? And so, but like,
I think everybody goes through that
yeah,
in some way.
but like it was like, well, we can disagree, and I don't have to like what he believes or what he thinks, but I can still like I still love him.
But is that where it started, or did you go, like with my dad, I seriously thought my dad was a moron when I was in high school. I resented him. I thought he was weak. I didn't know that he knew hand-to-hand combat and blew up things in World War II and was a badass. I didn't know that. He was just weak to me.
Mhm.
To me, he was a pastor, and they were weak, and they didn't say what they felt, and we said one thing at home and did another thing.
Mhm.
So did you have a place where that was a pivot point where you went, this, my dad, I don't know if I even like my dad too. I have to choose now if I'm gonna go my own way and write him off, or we're gonna press in and learn how to talk to each
I
other.
think that was the I think being out of the house and not being under your law, because there was for the lot in high school, a lot of it was so strict to the point. And it's weird because you've talked about this, like you did struggle saying no to us, like you wanted to give us things, but there was a point where it was like your way or the highway. Like we couldn't have the conversation, even if it didn't feel like we could have the conversations if we disagreed.
Yeah, and I think that came from feeling like that I didn't have y'all's respect,
Yeah.
which you teach that,
Yeah.
so it's like, don't question me. I'm the boss, and you're going to do what I said because I said so.
Uh-huh.
Well, you can make somebody do something by force. It doesn't mean they're doing it on the inside.
Right.
You know what I mean? So for us, when you sent us the letter and made the declarations, I could sense, because I pay attention to stuff like that you were struggling.
Yeah.
And that's when I had to make just a black and white choice of, I will not lose my daughter to this.
Yeah.
I'm not losing her. In high school, I was all you and your sisters and were beautiful girls. I mean, physically beautiful. Your personalities were beautiful, and people were attracted to you guys, and it made me really nervous about, especially at that point in time, guys that were trying to hit on y'all. So I was really protective,
Mhm.
probably overly so.
Yeah, that time you stormed out, or we had like 10 guys at the house. Oh, that was
Embarrassing and humiliating.
yeah, as a high schooler. But I think too that's where I think that was the one time that you started being really real with me. It was like you're like, I feel like you don't listen to me, you don't respect me. I tell you all these things, and you just go off and flip the middle finger at me and go off and do your thing. Which yes, I was doing, and I was still listening.
You remember you said that. You
Yeah.
goes, Dad, you may not know it, but I'm always listening.
Yeah.
So even those beginning conversations of breaking that ice, I'm listening. Oh, really? I didn't know.
Yeah.
I thought you were giving me the finger and just doing whatever the hell you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that was going, oh, really? They are listening. I didn't know.
Or I would, I would hear myself giving advice to my friends or say something, and it was literally verbatim, a dad quote. And I'm like, geez,
Yeah.
like, you're like, I am like, I mean, just the other day, I was like, that is seriously my dad. Yesterday, I was talking with one of my friends who came over. I was like, that literally just quoted my dad.
You talked for what, 4 hours?
Yeah.
So we have this ability to talk, and we were talking to Rachel like earlier too, as our friend and pastor. We have this ability to just go down these paths.
Mhm.
And so, and to what Darby said, and we're mentioning names because we want them to know we appreciate it, but
Yeah.
is we want people to see us as we really are, not some AI script that we created so we can get content. So that might be a reset too of us just going, what's going on with us?
Yeah.
Like your reaction yesterday caused me to react, or you said some things that, in my own thinking, I reacted to too, because most of which I agree with.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I think we both, where we're at we come from different, similar parallels in our faith, but you being, on this journey for a while and me coming back to it, where you and I both have a lot of opinions and rage and anger around
and we
how
are. Go ahead. And how?
and how like how the church has been and how, you know, I get my feathers ruffled like crazy because that's what kept me so far away from God for so long, was how I saw people.
And define church, because people, when you say church, people think going to a building and sitting and
Yeah, and there's a difference, and I think that took me years to get to the place of there's a difference between religion and church, and how
the institution of church,
the whole institution versus the body of Christ and this more organic
kingdom of God.
Exactly. There's a difference, and it took me a lot of years to realize the difference of like following Jesus and his teachings is different than saying I'm a Christian. Like everyone and their mom can say they're a Christian. That doesn't mean jack. And so
in fact, that was what triggered the conversation yesterday, is because we were seeing some situations where people were going, oh yeah, we're Christians, really? Because it sure doesn't look like it. Look at your activity. And then it sounds like we're bad-mouthing him, because no, we're talking to ourselves.
Yeah.
We're not saying that we're any better than anybody else out there.
Well, I think yesterday when I popped off, I think that what that showed me was like, I have some work to do. Like I have all these opinions and these bad thoughts about, for instance, about men, and I'm talking to someone who I think is one of the greatest dudes of all time, my own dad, or like my brother, who's a great man, yet I still have all these struggles with, like, I get really angry and I have a lot of rage. And so it's like, when I pop off and I hear myself popping off, I'm like, okay, I can put all that on other people, but then how do I turn the mirror on me and actually start looking at where do I need to shift, and also like where do I need to speak up and stand up?
Maybe the anger is justified.
It's like righteous anger.
Yeah, and we can be angry about social justice. And I think that's probably what makes me angry about a lot of this is I'm a justice seeker. I want justice for everybody else but me, and for me, I want mercy. It's not apologizing for that anger that you felt, because I think it's very justified. One of the stories about Jesus was Israel is occupied by the Romans, and he's walking in the temple, and it looks like a bazaar. It looks like a marketplace. So as he's walking along, he's making a whip. And he says, you guys have made my father's house a den of thieves. He didn't blow a gasket and just freak out and hurt people, but he did knock over some tables and drive them out of the court of the Gentiles, or wherever that was.
When he was defending the oppressed, like those people were getting
taken advantage of.
yeah, basically raped with taxes and all of that stuff. And so it was this righteous anger.
So it's us, you and I both, is learning how to channel that for good. And it doesn't mean beating people up verbally or whatever, and annihilating people with that. It's how do we bring life and peace and still be, I think it's good. That's another thing I like about you. You don't like injustice. Jordan does not, my son, your brother, doesn't like injustice. He will fight to the end for people he feels like are being taken advantage of.
Right. Well, and then also, like, switching gears a little bit, like, to this podcast and what it's bringing up, like, for us personally, like, what are the things that you're noticing about me and my personality, or just us working together now for the last 15 weeks? Where am I pressing your buttons, or where am I, challenging you?
Yeah, one is,
because we don't agree on everything, right? We don't, and I know that I rub you the wrong way, like, because you say you can't get a word in, so that's why the only way you can is when you do interrupt me.
Right, and then I cut you off, and I think that's when you have two strong personalities. I'm not really sure. One is you're not a child. We talked about that before anymore. You're a grown woman.
Was that hard for you to to adjust to?
I don't know why it surprised me. I've been here the whole trip of you growing up, but it's like you went away.
Yeah.
You got skills. You have talent, gifts even. in some weird way, it's a dichotomy, is you don't need me,
Mm,
you know? I know you would say you do need me in your life, but you don't need me to function in life. You moved away, Kirsten moved away, Jordan, Haley, you all have your lives. And if I died today, you would be sad, but you would go on and live your life, which is what I would want,
right.
so
But there's something about that though that as like freaks you out or like
it doesn't freak me out.
unsettles you or anything?
No, it's irritating in that you have your own opinions and your own way of doing things. You're a perfectionist, for example, with regard to getting the lighting right and getting in the weeds with some of the content and piddly stuff to me that doesn't matter. But what that's forced me to do is, well, it doesn't matter to you, but maybe it matters to her. And why is that such a big deal for me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Is there something I just thought of this like being that I'm an adult and you see me as that, does that then put us on, I don't know how to ask this in the right way, but does that put us then on equal playing
yeah,
fields? Whereas
yeah,
for so long it wasn't.
yep,
You were on this higher plane, so to speak. And I that's been a journey for me because I put you and mom on these pedestals. I think that might be a natural thing a kid does is your parents are your saviors, they do everything. And then at some point that you take them off those pedestals and you see their brokenness,
yeah,
their um, you know, mishaps or whatever, and you see like their human frailty, and
yeah.
you either again like accept that them for who they are or you don't. But yeah, does that us then being on equal, is that unsettling? Like,
It's not unsettling. It is a fact, though. When I was a child, I spoke and acted like a child. When I grew up, became an adult, things changed.
mm,
The fact that you and your siblings are out there being human beings with lives and dreams and hopes and relationships means that we did something right when you were growing up, even if we royally jacked up some things.
mm-hmm,
So yes, being a peer is hard.
mm-hmm,
I have a friend who's in his 80s. He has been like a father to me. And when I was 23, that relationship was very fatherly. Well, I left for 26 years. I lived in the same town as he did. Your mom and I left, and you guys went with us, and we moved about every 5 years for 25 years.
mm-hmm,
In my work. When we came back, it was almost like role reversal.
mm-hmm.
He needed, he became more frail, and he became less decisive, interestingly, and needs me in a different way
Mm-hmm.
than he did before. And I think that's kind of like what you and I are experiencing is we are friends, but we're peers. I'm still your father. We still have these conversations that are daughter father where you're asking me for advice. And it's learning, this is a hard one for me. It's don't give people advice they don't ask for.
Mm-hmm.
Darby and I had a conversation like that once. She said, you could have put a period right there and stopped, but you kept going. Like you had to add something. So it's learning to discern your place.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a lot of like ego, right? Of letting go
Yeah.
of our, accepting that these roles shift and change and that.
Seasons.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure as a parent, I'm not a parent yet, but I can only imagine, like, I was talking to Tom, the neighbor, about it
Oh,
with
yeah.
his kids. It's like, his kid's been out of the house for years too, but him and his wife are going through things, and he's like, I have to let them. I have all of my ideas and opinions of what they could do, but I have to let that be and not say anything because
Yeah.
it's his own life, it's his own marriage, it's his own world, and I've got to.
That's something that I am very aware of and practice. And for me, it's especially hard to even get silent. Because when I'm not talking, the noise
Hmm.
in my thinking, I'm always thinking about things. And it's really getting still so that you can discern what you need to do in
Yeah.
each given interaction with somebody.
Well, and I think as a kid, like, and just me specifically, like my experience with this dynamic and us getting to this place where, yeah, I went off and I grew up and I came home and, a friend was watching the podcast and was like, "What? It's kind of weird because you're serious. You're all serious." And like, and I have this.
That's not bad,
No,
though.
it's not, and it is. It's weird for me though too. Like I see who I was. I'm able to step back and see who I was, and I have this playful, energetic, childlike spirit that can be silly and goofy, and I think that oftentimes is how I'm also able to connect with people. Is it's like it's non-threatening,
Yeah.
and I have this other side of me that a lot of people don't see. Or when I was in college, crying because I didn't feel like anybody took me seriously. But when I looked at like how I was dressing, how I acted, I of course
Didn't your coach say something about that, or a
a
teacher?
teacher, I think because I skipped a class and got in trouble, and the girls had to run for me, which is horrible. But like that was again a point where I had to turn the mirror and be like, okay, Hillary, like people don't see that serious, mature side of you because you don't let people see that. Like you only show the playful, goofy, crazy side. What?
Nice socks. Bombas.
Yeah, Rachel gave these to me. They're so nice.
Sorry.
I love a good pair.
No.
I love a good pair. Like
But
they're
when you were
so
talking about
comfortable.
you and then it
Um,
says Bombas on there.
um,
Sorry about that.
it's okay.
I threw you off.
You did.
Darby, forgive me.
She's not the only one that said
I
that.
know.
Um,
Jordan? Another place where I've seen a change is Kirsten, your twin,
yeah.
married Matthew, and that changed the whole dynamic too. Her calling me for advice doesn't happen as much anymore. And
Yeah.
getting used to that because she and Matthew are making their own choices, creating their own traditions,
Yeah.
doing all that as a unit now. And so you have to take your place. And if I really love them, I'm not going to be calling them every 5 minutes
Yeah.
what are you doing? Why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Same with Jordan and his girlfriend. They have to, you can hover and just make a mess and get in the way of people having their own relationships by being too into it.
Yeah, too involved. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the tough part about growing. It is like one, recognizing in yourself that like I don't have to take all of this to my parents all the time.
Yeah.
I have my independence, and let me like, you know, be in that. And I can choose though when to seek their advice, and
Right.
and accepting like, with any relationship that has time and longevity to it, like I can cling on to who you were
Right.
yesterday, and like if anything comes, is different from that, I can like try to force it to be how it was, or I am open to the fact that you're always changing, I'm always changing, and like we all have these different layers, and like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I was thinking about how this could have been so much different if how I responded to you when you were talking to us about your sexuality. It just could have been a whole other story, depending on how I responded to you in the moment. Haley and I had a very similar conversation at that point about Hayden.
when she was, because she, she got pregnant young, and
Yeah.
that was
And the thing is, though, is to answer your question is, I think
what's the question again?
the question is what about me triggers you or something?
Oh yeah,
Paraphrasing. But I think part of that is you don't breathe when you talk. We don't. I don't know if you're uncomfortable with it, but I know I am. Is I don't like silence. So I fill it up with words. You and I have more words per sentence than about anybody I know. And it's practicing space so that what we are talking about can land with each other. And I think for me, it's okay, quit trying to make a point here. You don't have to have an opinion about this. You can practice not being right, not having a response, all those things. and recalibrating and resetting the way we think.
Hmm. Hmm. And I think one of the biggest things is, we've talked about this before in other episodes, is that we're in, and again, back to what we were talking about in the beginning, even of this, of we're in suspension. We are growing as we speak, and we're going to mess up. I struggle with my, being someone who is, how do I word it, has perfectionism. I don't want to say is a perfectionist, but has
Tendencies.
those tendencies. Is, it, I withdraw often when I feel threatened or I feel unsafe or triggered.
Yeah,
I withdraw,
yeah,
and a lot of that comes from, one, like, being not being okay with the feeling out of control, and two, like, I don't want to mess up my wording. Like, I want to have this polished, that perfectionism. I want to come out and have this well-read speech that, and I think that's an insecurity, because oftentimes I know this about myself. I'm breathing. Is that it takes me longer to identify and understand how I'm feeling in the moment. And other people, you're faster
yeah.
with that. And so you have the words, and you
Have more practice.
have that. And I think it's a personality thing too. I think that's where a difference. And so it's an insecurity where I feel inferior. I feel not as
Yeah.
smart or less than. And that's something that, when I look at other areas in my life, there's a theme of, like, it hits on, like, ultimately you're not good enough. You're not smart enough.
Yeah.
And so I think when I feel like I have something to say, it's coming up, and I need that space to say it. Just takes me longer to do it, and I think you get antsy because it's
Yeah.
bringing something at you, and you want to share it.
In my head, I'm thinking, get to the point.
Right.
You don't have to say it in 50 words. Can you say it in 5?
Yeah.
But doesn't mean I'm right.
Yeah.
It's just I'm impatient.
Well, and I, as someone who I think is a storyteller, like, I like to build the context, and in my brain it helps me. So
Yeah.
not everyone needs that, and so I get where people are like, yeah, get to the point. Whereas, like, it doesn't always have to be this drawn out story. Why don't
Right.
you just say it? And
Or my coaching question of what's it like to be on the other side of a conversation with you is pointing that back at me and going, well, it might be irritating and exhausting for one. How can I make this more? How can I be a good listener? I mean, we keep going back to that. It's creating this space. But anyway, it's
filmed
good conversation.
Yeah. Like, what are our hopes for the next 15 episodes? We just got done filming episode 15 that's
Right.
coming out this week.
Recalibrating to being authentic, because that was the original thing that we talked about with Yaz, is being authentic, not worrying as much about the content as it is about the conversation,
Hmm.
not trying to make everybody happy. I hate getting hater mail online. I hate it. I don't read it. It makes me feel like crap.
Which is, it's like, it's funny, because I thought when we started this that I would struggle more with that than you. And it's been interesting to see you in those moments get more heated and
Well,
more
it makes me
upset.
angry because you don't know me and you just bashed me for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
And it's not right. I mean, have some manners and some common decency, because I wouldn't do that to you.
Well, and you also have, I think, as someone who's older and not as abreast. Is that
Yeah,
right?
apprised, abreast of.
Like, to the whole social media world where there's just trolls, and there's just, I mean, I'm not as used to it, because I'm not, being a millennial, I'm not as tech savvy as a lot of my peers are, and I'm not as into the world of where it's like I don't interact and have a lot of dialogue with strangers. You know what I mean? I'll comment on people's stuff, but it's people are brutal and really mean. And anybody I talk to or see online who has more than one view gets some sort of, like, hater, some sort of troll. And it's like, that's a reality, a landscape that y'all's generation really doesn't know a lot about. Whereas, like, Marley, my niece, who's an Gen Alpha,
Yeah.
that's what she's grown up in.
Yeah.
And so it's so,
Native.
and y'all have this like respect, this respect thing of like, this like, where are your manners type thing, whereas
Yeah.
that they don't know that. They don't even know what it's like.
And so maybe that's it, is having authentic conversations. I don't have any takeaways other than just us being real. And that's, again, we were talking to Rachel, she said, just be you and have the conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's good counsel.